The moment you start honoring your own emotional clarity over their chaos, everything changes. Narcissists count on your confusion. They rely on it. It's their playground where they twist your words, project their flaws onto you, and keep you in a constant state of trying to decode their behavior. But clarity is their enemy. When you're clear on what's acceptable and what isn't, when you're no longer trying to fix, please, or prove, they feel the shift instantly. It's like cutting the power to a machine. They can't run their patterns anymore. That's what makes one boundary-setting sentence so disruptive. It's not just that the words are direct, it's that they come from someone who finally sees what's going on. Narcissists don't fear arguments. They fear awareness. They fear someone who sees the manipulation and refuses to respond to it, because now the tools don't work, the charm doesn't land, the guilt trips fall flat, the silence no longer scares you. What terrifies a narcissist isn't confrontation, it's irrelevance. And when you no longer seek their approval, their reaction, or their version of events, they become exactly that, irrelevant. That's the deepest fear they carry, that someone could walk away and not look back. That someone could know everything they've done and still choose themselves. And when you finally stop waiting for the apology, the change, the validation, and start trusting your own emotional compass, that's when they lose access. You don't even need to be angry. Your peace is enough. Your detachment is loud. Your clarity is final. And that's the one thing they can't argue with. You're no longer playing the game. You're not challenging their ego. You're walking past it. Not out of fear, but out of self-respect. And once you do that, the narcissist isn't just afraid of you. They respect you in a way they can't show, because you're now the one thing they can't manipulate, someone who knows their worth. Narcissists aren't complex in the way they operate. They're predictable. They run on ego, thrive on admiration, and manipulate to maintain control. If you strip away the charm and drama, their behavior boils down to one thing: survival of their inflated sense of self. They walk through life needing to be the smartest, most admired, most envied person in the room. And when that identity is threatened, when someone refuses to bow, to engage, to be controlled, they feel exposed. But here's the catch: they're not going to show fear with trembling hands or anxious eyes. No, they'll mask it with rage, arrogance, or dismissal, because beneath their superiority complex is deep, gnawing insecurity. Narcissists are terrified of being irrelevant, unimportant, or worst of all, seen for who they truly are. That's why they lash out when someone holds a mirror up to their behavior. That's why they gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. They need the illusion of control to feel safe. They use emotional manipulation, blame, shifting, and charm as their tools, and if those don't work, they resort to shaming or stonewalling. They want you to be off balance. Because when you're doubting yourself, defending your every word, and fighting to be heard, they are in charge. But the moment you no longer play that game, the whole system collapses. That's why one well-placed boundary can feel like an earthquake to a narcissist. They're not afraid of the sentence itself. They're afraid of what it means. It means you're done seeking validation. It means you're no longer emotionally available for manipulation. It means they're no longer the one calling the shots. And for someone whose entire self-worth is built on control, that is terrifying. They can't regulate their own self-esteem without external praise or submission. When you disrupt that supply, you threaten their very foundation. They may try harder, they may rage louder, or they may discard you like you never mattered, but none of that changes the fact that you've reclaimed your space. That's why this sentence is so powerful. It's not a punch or a scream, it's a quiet revolution, a declaration that you will no longer be emotionally blackmailed. Narcissists fear people they can't confuse, people who stay calm, people who know who they are. And when you become that person, they don't just lose power over the conversation, they lose power over you. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, what just happened. You feel drained, questioning your own thoughts. You're angry, confused, maybe even ashamed. That's what it feels like to be wrapped in the psychological tornado of a narcissist. But today, we are flipping the script because I'm going to give you one sentence, just one, that will make any narcissist fear you forever. Now listen. This isn't about revenge. This is about freedom, about never letting someone manipulate your mind, gaslight your reality, or steal your peace again. And I know, maybe it's your boss, your partner, a parent, a friend, someone you can't easily walk away from. That's why you need to hear every word of what I'm about to tell you, because when you use this sentence, you take back your power. You stop feeding their ego. You draw a line so sharp, so clear, so unshakable, it's like shining a spotlight on their game. And narcissists hate that. Why? Because narcissists don't fear confrontation. They don't fear arguments. What they fear is losing control over you. What they fear is being seen. So here it is, the sentence. I'm not available for this conversation until you're ready to be respectful. That's it. Simple, firm, boundaried, and when you say it, you mean it. You stop talking. You stop explaining. You stop playing their game because narcissists thrive on drama. They feed off your defensiveness, your explanations, your need to be understood. This sentence cuts off the fuel supply. It's like slamming a door in the face of manipulation. You're not yelling. You're not pleading. You're just done. And that silence, that calm certainty, that's what makes them fear you. Because they know they can't reach you anymore. They've lost access to your energy, and here's what happens next. They might rage, they might guilt trip, they might pretend to play nice, but you keep your boundary. You repeat the sentence if needed, and you walk away from the chaos because you don't owe anyone access to you, especially not someone who weaponizes your kindness. You owe you peace, and now you have the sentence to protect it. Don't just remember it, practice it, own it. Let it become your armor, your shield, your line in the sand. And if you've ever felt small in the presence of someone who always had to be right, had to win, had to control you, this is how you rise. With one sentence, because sometimes power isn't loud, it's quiet, it's calm, it's knowing who you are, and refusing to hand that over. Now go say it, and watch the fear in their eyes when they realize they don't control you anymore. When you say the sentence, I'm not available for this conversation until you're ready to be respectful, it does more than end the argument. It ends the power imbalance. This isn't a sentence you throw out emotionally or in the heat of battle. It's not a clever comeback. It's a firm, conscious shift in your energy. It's the moment you stop fighting for space and start owning it. Narcissists don't expect that. They expect you to react, to justify, to beg for understanding. Because that's where they feel most powerful, when they're the puppet master and you're tangled in invisible strings. But this sentence cuts the strings. It's short, it's sharp, and it signals that you know exactly what's happening and you're done participating. It tells them your behavior no longer dictates mine. You're not threatening, you're not pleading, you're just calmly withdrawing from the circus. That calm tone, that boundary, that's what unnerves them. Because narcissists feed on emotional chaos and you've just removed the menu, this one sentence changes everything because it's not trying to win, it's trying to exit, and when you're no longer competing in their control-based game, they have nothing to push against. No energy to drain, no narrative to spin. You don't flinch, you don't explain, you detach, and in that detachment is your power. That's what makes them fear you, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. You're done dancing around their moods, apologizing for your tone, over-explaining every feeling. You're no longer afraid to disappoint them. You're no longer hooked by their approval. That one sentence, spoken from a place of grounded self-respect, shuts down manipulation instantly. Because narcissists can't twist what you don't give them. They can't control what you refuse to hand over. And they can't maintain power over someone who's no longer available for the role of victim. Here's the truth. Narcissists don't fear confrontation. In fact, they thrive in it. They'll poke, prod, escalate, and provoke because they want you reactive. The more emotional you get, the more power they have. So, yelling at them won't work. Arguing with facts, they'll twist them. Silent treatment, they'll use it first and harder. But there is one thing, a single shift, that makes them uncomfortable, that unsettles their confidence, and makes them realize their control is slipping. It's you refusing to play. When you calmly draw a line, when you establish a clear boundary with no explanation, no emotional outburst, and no need for their approval, that's when they panic. Because narcissists don't want you to be calm. They want you unbalanced. They want access to your buttons. So when you suddenly say, "I'm not available for this conversation until you're ready to be respectful," and then actually disengage, they don't know what to do with that. You've just taken away the stage, the audience, and the emotional fuel they feed on. That one sentence is powerful not just for the words, but for what it represents. It represents control returning to you. You're no longer trying to win them over. You're no longer afraid of upsetting them. You're no longer giving in to their twisted version of truth. Instead, you're anchoring yourself in clarity. You're setting the terms. And you're doing it without fear. That's what narcissists can't handle. When they realize they don't control your emotions anymore, when you stop explaining, when you stop defending, when you stop needing them to agree with your point of view. This one sentence is terrifying to them because it shifts the entire power dynamic. It removes their oxygen, the attention, the argument, the emotional reaction. It's not about being aggressive. It's about being unavailable for the nonsense. You're not rejecting them with rage. You're simply unavailable for abuse, and that confuses them. It frustrates them. It scares them, because in that moment, they know you see them clearly. You're not scared anymore. You're not looking for closure. You've already closed the door. Have you ever walked into a room or started a conversation and walked away feeling completely twisted inside, like your emotions were hijacked and your thoughts no longer felt like your own? That's not by accident. That's the effect of a narcissist. These individuals don't just argue or disagree. They make you question your reality. It's subtle, it's sharp, and it's intentional. Narcissists don't look like villains. They look like your best friend, your romantic partner, your family member. They're charming, they're persuasive. They make you feel like you're the problem, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Because by the time you realize you're being emotionally manipulated, the damage is already underway. Your self-esteem is shaken. You're walking on eggshells. You're over-explaining yourself. You're seeking their validation, their approval, their calm. And that's exactly where they want you. Unsure, dependent, and always apologizing. That's why this conversation is so important, because the moment you start recognizing that emotional chaos as a pattern instead of a one-time event, you begin to take back your power. You begin to see the narcissist not as someone who's just difficult, but as someone who feeds off control. You understand that their compliments are bait. Their silence is a punishment, their charm. A tool. Everything they do has one purpose, to dominate the emotional tone of the relationship, and if you don't call it out, not necessarily to them, but to yourself, you'll keep playing the same game with different rules. You'll think, if I explain better, they'll understand. Or if I just stay calm, maybe things won't escalate. But narcissists don't want resolution. They want control. They want to win. And they win by keeping you confused, defensive, and small. So when you realize this, really realize it, it changes everything. It forces you to stop waiting for their empathy. It forces you to stop hoping for fairness. It forces you to stop thinking that if you just love them harder, they'll change. Because they won't. What will change is you. The moment you stop trying to fix it and start trying to protect yourself, everything shifts. You stop asking, why do they treat me this way? And start asking, why do I keep letting them? That shift is where your freedom begins. Not in their reaction, but in your recognition. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. That's why this isn't just a speech, it's a mirror, a wake-up call, a reminder that if you've felt manipulated, it's not because you're weak. It's because you're human. And now you're ready to stop surviving and start reclaiming your voice. You know that feeling when you're stuck in a conversation that's spiraling out of control, and no matter what you say, it feels like you're losing. Like the more you try to explain yourself, the more twisted everything becomes. That's not just a tough conversation. It's emotional warfare, and that's exactly how a narcissist keeps you under their thumb. They thrive on that tension. They manipulate you not by force, but by confusion. They'll say something cruel and then act like you're the one overreacting. They'll rewrite reality right in front of you, and somehow you'll end up apologizing for things you didn't even do. And the reason this works so well is because you care. You're the type who reflects, who tries to communicate, who wants peace. You come into conversations looking for understanding, but narcissists don't want understanding. They want advantage. That's why they gaslight. That's why they twist facts. That's why they act one way in public and another behind closed doors. The truth is, they don't just want to win. They need to feel superior, and your empathy becomes their playground. The more you try to reason with them, the more ammunition they have. The moment you express hurt, they label you sensitive. If you stay calm, they say you're cold. If you get upset, they say you're unstable. You can't win because the entire conversation was never about resolution. It was about domination. That's why the idea of one sentence stopping them in their tracks is so powerful, because it interrupts the cycle. It refuses to play the game. It doesn't argue, explain, or seek their understanding. It sets a boundary, and narcissists hate boundaries. They fear them, because a boundary means you see through their act. It means you're no longer seeking their validation. It means they're losing their grip. And once a narcissist knows they can't manipulate your emotions, they lose interest or they explode. Either way, the illusion of control is shattered. But here's the key. You have to believe your boundary matters, because the sentence only works if you mean it, if you speak it from a place of strength, not desperation. That's why we're not just talking about words, we're talking about energy. About the calm, grounded conviction that says, you don't get to decide who I am. That's what makes them fear you. Not your volume, but your clarity. Not your anger, but your refusal to engage in emotional games anymore. So here's the truth. Narcissists don't fear your anger, your arguments, or even your silence. What they fear, what terrifies them, is your clarity, your calm, your refusal to play the game. That one sentence, I'm not available for this conversation until you're ready to be respectful, isn't just a boundary. It's a revolution. It says, I see you, and you no longer have power here. It signals the end of their emotional grip and the beginning of your freedom. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you feel powerful, not because you yelled louder or fought harder, but because you finally stood still in your truth. That's the moment everything changes. That's when healing begins, and that's why they'll fear you. Not for what you say, but for what you've become, someone who cannot be controlled. So if you've been waiting for permission to reclaim your voice, consider this it. You're not overreacting, you're not too sensitive, you're finally awake, and that right there is your power. Now go use it.